She told our friends she was going on a date with a coworker, and everyone laughed, thinking I'd just swallow it like a spineless fool. But when the room quieted and all eyes turned to me, I simply reached into my briefcase, and that was the moment the entire night flipped. Before I go on, don't forget to subscribe, hit like, and drop a comment. This story is one you won't want to miss. It happened on an ordinary Thursday evening, the kind that's supposed to feel routine and safe. We were at our dining room table, finishing a quiet dinner with two neighbors who'd stopped by, Mark and his wife, Lisa. The lights were soft, the air smelled faintly of roasted herbs, and the only sound was the low hum of the dishwasher in the kitchen. I remember thinking the whole scene felt staged, like someone had arranged it carefully for a moment I didn't yet understand. My wife, Claire, sat across from me in a dress she rarely wore anymore, a navy one I'd once bought her, back when she used to smile without thinking. Her hair was styled in loose waves, more elaborate than a casual dinner required. She kept touching the curls, smoothing them, twisting them, glancing at her phone every few minutes as if waiting for a cue only she knew about. I noticed all of this. I had been noticing for months. Still, I played the part of the quiet husband, refilling water glasses, clearing plates, nodding politely as our guests talked about weekend plans. Underneath that calm, though, something inside me had settled into a quiet, icy awareness, a readiness. The moment came casually, almost lazily, as if she were tossing out a comment about the weather. "I should get going soon," Claire announced, taking one last sip from her wine glass. "I've got a date tonight." The room froze. Mark blinked. Lisa coughed into her napkin as though she'd misheard. But Claire just smiled, that practiced, reckless smile she'd been wearing lately, and added, "It's just a colleague from work. His name's Jason. We've grown close." Then, unbelievably, she laughed. Actually laughed. And our guests, unsure, awkward, let out a few confused chuckles of their own. That I sat perfectly still. She expected outrage, a scene, maybe even begging. She expected me to fall apart right there in front of everyone so she could look justified, maybe even heroic. The poor woman stuck with a man who simply didn't understand her anymore. But instead, I folded my napkin neatly, placed it beside my empty plate, and looked her straight in the eye. "That's so?" I said quietly. Something flickered in her expression. Confusion, unease, a tiny crack in the performance she'd rehearsed. The silence pressed into the room like a weight. Even the dishwasher seemed to pause. She shrugged, trying to reclaim her carefree tone. "It's not a big deal. You and I have grown apart. I think it's time I start seeing what else is out there." Lisa stared at her plate, horrified. Mark looked at me like he was watching a man sit calmly beside a detonated bomb. That I leaned back slowly, feeling the tension in the room gathering like a storm. My voice was steady, almost eerily so. "Claire," I said, "if that's truly how you feel, then I think you should sign something before you go." Her smile froze. "Sign what?" she asked, forcing out a small laugh. That I reached into my briefcase, the same one I'd brought home every day for 12 years, and pulled out a manila folder, thick, heavy, prepared with the precision of someone who'd stopped allowing himself to be blindsided. I set it on the table between us. "This," I said simply. The way Mark inhaled sharply, the way Lisa's eyes widened. They felt the shift in the air before she did. Claire looked at the folder as though it might burn her fingers if she touched it. She tried to joke again. "What is this, some kind of dramatic gesture? A guilt trip?" "No," I said. "Just open it." Reluctantly, she reached for the folder. Her fingers trembled. She lifted the cover, and I watched her whole face change, her confidence draining like water through a sieve. Her eyes darted across the first page. Then the second, she swallowed hard. "This is a separation agreement," she said. Her voice cracked on the last word. That's right. You can't be serious. I'm very serious. The room went dead silent. Even our guests didn't dare shift in their seats. She looked up at me, stunned, and for the first time in months, I saw real fear flicker behind her eyes. She wasn't expecting strength. She wasn't expecting calm. She wasn't expecting me to have already done the math, the legwork, the preparation. But I had, and as she stared at those papers, her entire world slowed to a halt. Mark and Lisa excused themselves as quietly as people fleeing a fire, whispering something about an early morning appointment before slipping out the door. The moment it clicked shut, the house fell into a suffocating stillness. Claire sat frozen at the table, one hand still resting on the folder, as if touching it might somehow change its contents. Her voice, when it finally came, was small, brittle. When did you even put all this together? I didn't raise my tone. I didn't need to. 3 weeks ago. I watched her eyes widen, watched the realization sink in that I hadn't been blindsided or confused or naive. I'd been aware, preparing, choosing my moment. She pushed the folder toward me as if it were poisoned. This is insane. You're overreacting. It's just dinner with a coworker. I let out a low, mirthless breath. Read page 2. She flipped it open again, her fingers shaking. Her eyes scanned the lines, then snapped up to mine in shock. You already moved most of the savings? Legally, I said simply. My attorney confirmed everything. She opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again like she was searching for a script that no longer applied. I can't believe you'd do this. Funny, I replied. I had the same thought about you for months. She flinched, not theatrically, genuinely. She looked down at the papers again, scanning the pages faster now, as though the speed of reading could somehow undo what was already done. You kept the house for yourself, she whispered. My inheritance paid for it, I reminded her. It's separate property in this state. You know that. She shook her head, the curls she'd styled so carefully beginning to collapse. You planned all of this behind my back. And you started dating behind mine? I said, still calm, still anchored. We each made choices. She stood abruptly, the chair scraping the floor sharply. That's not the same, and you know it. No, I said, leaning forward. It isn't. What you did was worse. She had no comeback. None at all. I watched her hands tremble as she paced the room, her breath coming too fast, her thoughts scrambling for footing. You could have talked to me, she said finally, desperation leaking into every syllable. You could have just asked what was going on. I did, I said softly. Repeatedly. She stopped pacing. That's not fair. No, I said. Fair would have been honesty. She opened her mouth to argue, but something in my expression must have stopped her. She sank back into her chair slowly, as if her legs could barely hold her anymore. The dress she'd chosen so confidently earlier now looked out of place, like she'd shown up at the wrong audition. Why didn't you confront me when you first suspected? She asked quietly. I took a moment before answering, letting the truth settle in my own chest. Because I wanted clarity, not chaos. If I confronted you 3 months ago, you would have lied, and I would have reacted emotionally. Instead, I gathered facts. Her breath hitched. You actually hired someone? A private investigator. Very good at her job. Claire's face drained as she understood the weight of what I was saying. There are photos? Yes. A beat of silence. Of what? Her voice trembled. Coffee, lunch, long meetings, a visit to his apartment. She closed her eyes like she was bracing for impact. We didn't. I don't care whether you crossed that final line or not. I cut in. The betrayal started long before anything physical. She gripped the edge of the table, knuckles whitening. I just needed to feel noticed again. Wanted. Her voice cracked on the last word. You didn't even look at me anymore. I never stopped looking, I said quietly. I just didn't recognize the woman who stopped looking back. Something inside her gave way. The arrogance, the bravado, the casual cruelty she'd worn like perfume. All of it fell off her in an instant. What remained was raw fear. So what happens next? She whispered. You sign, I said. We separate cleanly. You take the Honda. I'll give you $3,000 to help you move. 2 weeks to find a place. That's it. That's it. She stared at the folder again, her eyes scanning the pages hopelessly, as though searching for a loophole that wasn't there. And if I refuse? Then tomorrow morning my attorney files publicly. And everything, your messages, your meetings, the photos, becomes part of the record. Her breath rattled. You wouldn't. I will, I said, the words landing like a steel door closing. She covered her face with her hands, shaking. For the first time in a long time I felt nothing. No rage, no grief, just a clean, quiet certainty. She lowered her hands slowly, defeated. Do you have a pen? I slid one across the table. She stared at it, stared at me, then at the papers. Her hand hovered above the signature line, trembling, breaking. She leaned forward and began to sign. She signed slowly, like each stroke of the pen carved something out of her, something she hadn't realized she still valued. When she finished, she pushed the folder toward me without lifting her gaze. I checked each page carefully, then took photos and sent them to my attorney. She watched me with that hollow, stunned expression people get when the ground they trusted suddenly gives way. When I stood, she finally spoke. What now? Her voice was barely audible. Now I put these in the safe, I said, and you go upstairs, change out of that dress, and start thinking about your next steps. She gave a faint, humorless laugh. I texted Jason, told him I couldn't make it. I figured. He asked why. Tell him the truth, I said. Tell him you're separated. She wrapped her arms around herself. I don't know if I even want to see him anymore. That, I said, isn't my problem. I walked the folder to my study and locked it away. When I returned, she was still sitting there, staring at her hands like she didn't recognize them. Do you hate me? She asked. The question hung in the air like a fragile thread. I thought about it honestly, not rushing the answer. No, I said finally. Hate takes energy. I'm too tired for that. She nodded slowly, as though that answer hurt more than hatred ever could. She rose from the chair and headed upstairs. I listened to her footsteps fade down the hall, the soft click of the guest room door closing. I moved through the house, turning off lights one by one, each switch echoing like a chapter ending. When I finally made it to the bedroom, I changed into something comfortable and sat on the edge of the bed. The framed photos on the dresser caught my eye. Weddings, vacations, birthdays, frozen moments from a life that didn't exist anymore. I didn't take them down. Not yet. There would be time. My phone buzzed. A text from her. I'm sorry. I really am. I stared at the screen for a long moment before replying. I know, but sorry doesn't fix this. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Then finally, I know. I set the phone aside, turned off the lamp, and let the darkness settle. A few minutes later, I heard the front door open and close. Curious, I walked to the window. She stood in the driveway in jeans and a sweater, talking into her phone, shoulders shaking. Even from a distance, I knew exactly who she was calling. I stepped back. Her tears were no longer my responsibility. Her comfort wasn't my duty. Her choices led her there, outside in the cold, searching for someone who wasn't her husband. I returned to bed, pulled the blanket over myself, and closed my eyes. The house creaked in familiar ways, but everything felt different now. Cleaner, sharper, quieter. A life ending has its own kind of sound. After a while, the front door opened again. Soft footsteps, the faucet running, then nothing. Silence. Heavy, final. This was my world now, divided but steady. Mine. I lay there listening to the quiet, feeling something strange settle inside me. Not joy, not triumph, just peace. A hard-earned, scarred-over peace. Tomorrow would bring paperwork, explanations, uncomfortable conversations. But tonight, one truth rang clear in my mind. I had taken back the narrative. I had refused to be broken. I had chosen myself. And as I drifted toward sleep, one thought echoed through me with absolute clarity. Sometimes silence hits harder than any argument ever could. If you felt the story, if it grabbed you, surprised you, or made you think, subscribe, hit like, and leave a comment. Your support keeps these stories coming.